A very pleasant good afternoon. My name is Vincent Versace. Thank you for sitting through the last one of these. I'm going to talk about a project that I'm working on. It's a three-part project. It's called Turning the Last Page, : And the goal is to build a school, feed hungry children, and to put cameras in the hands of artists that can't have them. The idea about this project is that when you see an injustice, if you don't speak up, you're party to it. And if you see something that you can do, you should fix it, if you can fix it. So I'm a man that collects quotes, and one of my favorite quotes is, "The pen is mightier than the sword," which is accredited to Thomas Jefferson. Well, that's great, but Jefferson didn't have a camera. A camera is mightier than the pen. And so my goal here with this is to create a body of work that tells the story of the people of Myanmar that are coming out of the 19th century, the people of India that are living through the remnants of the British Raj, and Cuba. And so the goal of these projects is to produce a body of work that the profits from that work will buy cameras for the people in Cuba because they have such a strong photographic tradition. I'll feed hungry kids in India, and I'll build a school in a place where there is no school. That's the altruistic goal. It does not change the fact that I had an absolute blast so far photographing it, and it doesn't change the fact that the pictures change me, and I get to be better about it, about being a human being because of it. And what I want to do is talk about that experience. Now, I know what I want to say. Is there anything that you would like me to talk about or to know in the course of this conversation? If there was, what would it be? Bueller? No idea. Okay, so my work is done here then. All right. So let's start with the work. One of the things that I like to do is I take a gonzo approach to my photography, which is I like to plant myself in the middle of it and photograph 365 and create images in which, when you look at them, it's as if you were standing where I was when the picture took me. And I think that's a very important delineation to make, is that you don't take pictures, or you shouldn't take pictures. What you should do is be taken by the picture. That the photograph should rip you through the lens. At the impulse where you go, "That's cool," in that moment where you're going, that's the moment you're firing the shutter. So that all of the pictures that you see here are moments that took me. And I kind of view the type of work that I do as sort of like the vacation of my life, and these are the snapshots along the way. They're like the postcards. And what I want to convey, what I want to show is, what is the pretty? What is the thing about the world that is around us that is so beautiful that we have to make sure that others get to see it? I think that that's my job. I was listening to somebody do a critique, is like, what's your mission statement as a photographer? And so as I was thinking about that today, what would be my mission statement? I tell the truth and I see the pretty. That's my job. I invite all of you to consider that as it being your job. And think about it. What are the best moments of your life, if not the ones that you endeavor to capture with an image? Y'all made a decision. That decision is, this is the way that I want to express myself. This is the way that I want to show the world what it was like to be where I was when I was so compelled to fire the shutter. Okay, so tell the story about all the things that you see around you that are important, that move you. For me, in Cuba, what it is the innocence of these people. They're trapped somewhere between 1959 and 1962. And to be able to record that echo of a time that was more innocent, and that a time that was more open, and the way in which people relate, I think is a good lesson for all of us. So when I'm shooting this project, I want to be able to shoot not just the people, but the environment that the people live in. And I'm a big believer of, you shoot your portraits like landscapes, you shoot your landscapes like portraits. That you want to cross-pollinate as much as possible in all the different disciplines of photography. And the reason for that is so that you can take a flower like a portrait, you can take a landscape of a person in the whole totality of the way you say your name is everything you've ever done up until that moment in your life. My job is to capture everything that is you in that much time. I think that that is an admirable way to go about looking at taking pictures of people. With that, I like to walk into a situation and become part of that situation. That something the photographer Dwight said, I find the stage and the players come. And what he would do is he would set up his camera, sit down, and start drinking coffee in a cafe, and people would walk into his pictures. And by the time they realized that they had walked into his picture, he had the picture that he wanted, and then he was asking for forgiveness, not permission. Which is always better to do. Because the minute you start asking for permission, what you get is, and those aren't the cool shots, right? The cool shots are catching that moment where they notice you, connect with you, are part of you, and haven't realized that what you're doing is taking a photograph of them. And the purpose of this project that's going to get donated when it's all said and done is 100 years from now, being able to come back and look at, this is who we were. In Myanmar, this is who we were before we entered the 21st century. In India, this is what we're about. And to be able to have that recorded in such a way that when you look at it, the moment takes you the way the photographer who took the picture was taken. I think it's an important thing to think about. Now, granted, with composition and all of this stuff, one of the things that I have come to realize is I don't really make photographs. I create optical illusions. And it's kind of based on something Picasso said, which is, art is a lie that tells the truth. And that in every act of creation, it first starts with a little act of destruction. And so my job is to move the eye in a way in which tells the story the way in which I was taken. So instead of relying on rules of thirds and Grecian mean and all that sort of stuff, what I'm more interested in is how's the eye going to move into this picture, and how do the geometrics of these objects in this picture tell the most compelling story? And then on top of that, how do I get the subject to show me that which it is they want to hide and get them to hide it in my camera? All of that like that. And it's really simple to do. The simplest way to do it is to just, there are two ways to think about shooting. There's to pre-visualize and not pre-visualize, right? Ansel Adams said that without pre-visualization, photography is nothing more than a five-finger exercise. Paul Caponegro said, if you believe in pre-visualization, you deserve what you get. Who's right? They both are. The best thing to pre-visualize when you walk out into any situation like this is to pre-visualize being amazed. That's all you need to think. I'm open and receptive to what's going to come my way and take me. And if you slow down, little kids will smile at you, babies will play with you, dogs won't bite you, it will stop raining, God beams will come up. No, sorry. I like being able to interact with my subject because I believe that a photograph doesn't happen here and it doesn't happen there. It happens in the space between subject and photographer. So what I feel happens is the subject does something to which I react, to which they react, to which I react, to their reacting, and what we start doing, we start moving like this. And if I can insert a camera in those moments, what I can do is have the picture take me and capture, and that's what every well-dressed dog is wearing these days in Cuba. I can have the picture take me, and then if I do it correctly, the only person that's in the photograph is the subject, and there's room for the new viewer to connect. And I think that those are the most successful photographs. A very great photographer, a mentor of mine, a gentleman named Jay Maisel, says, light, gesture, and color are the key components of anybody's photograph. He's absolutely right. Light, gesture, and color are the most important elements of any photograph. But there's one other element that I think that is equally as important, and that is time, specifically timelessness. And what that means is catching a moment in which you can feel that there's a moment before it, a moment after it, and what you're seeing is that arc in between those two moments. Do that, that's successful. To be able to do that is you have to be able to ride that wave of whatever that person is doing that you're connecting with or the situation that you're connecting to. So if you can make a photograph timeless, when you can look at a picture and you don't know when it was, you know where it was, this is Cuba, but when? It could be anywhere from 1962 to today. Those pictures, I think, are the ones that are the most successful. It's the ability, for lack of a better way to phrase it, being past and present today. You can be in the moment, be in the past, but be right here, right now. Now, how many of y'all do street photography? Okay, do you practice before you go out and do street photography? Just pick up the camera and go? Is it like something you do frequently or something that you just do on occasion? Carry the camera with you. Okay, how many people use prime lenses in their street photography? 35 and that's all you're supposed to use, or 50 and forget it? Okay, how many use zooms? Use a zoom. Here's why. You walk into a situation, right? So you see something and you're walking into it. So I have a 28 to 300 millimeter zoom that I extend all the way out to 300. Brought the camera up, left it in the back. So you zoom it all the way out because you're going to walk in and it's easier to pick the camera up and slightly zoom than it is to go, oh, shoot. A zoom is a more effective tool. There's another thing called proximity sense. You know when somebody's looking at you from behind? Have you ever had that sensation, you know? Okay, that happens with the camera, and it happens more with the camera than with normal people because you're focusing your attention on that person, and people will pick that up. By having a zoom, you can shoot and then move into the area of proximity sense. They're more versatile. They allow for greater composition, which brings us to another question. Do you compose an image or frame it? Compose? Frame? Okay. How many people think it's stupid to raise your hand? All right. The question is, can you move the tree? If you can't move the tree, you're framing, which means that you have a whole bunch of other different variables in the way in which you set up the shot. You have this, you have this, you have this, you have this plus closeness. With the zoom, you can find, let's say I want these three people here, the relationship that you want, and then frame it to perfection. That's the advantage of a zoom, I find, in doing street photography. Keeping in mind that my favorite lens actually is a prime, even though I use mostly zooms, which is the 105 f1.4. I get to answer that. One of the things that I find in doing this type of work, and if you look at it, you should see that I use a lot of blur, or bokeh. It's pronounced bokeh. Boca is a city in Florida, also known as God's waiting room. That came out, didn't it? It came out. I'm doomed. Bokeh. It means the quality of blur. Now, if you think about a lens, and really for me, lenses are the brushes of photography. And I'm sponsored by a camera company that's actually a lens company that makes camera bodies. That's what Nikon is. It's a lens company. And what they do is they design camera bodies that are optimized to the capabilities of their lenses. And they still haven't been able to squeeze all of the wonder out of that glass. So the lenses are the brushes of photography. They're what make things look pretty. I have a 70 to 210, a 70 to 200 f4, a 70 to 200 2.8, an 80 to 400, a 24 to 120, a 105, and an 18 to 300, and a 28 to 300. Apparently, I like 105. Like apparently a lot, because I have nailed that range in just every lens. The reason why I have all those different lenses is they all do something different. They bend light in a different way. They create a different feel and look to the images. Now, if there's a misconception about depth of field that I'd like to address. What are the three elements of depth of field? Focus, or focal length, aperture, distance from the lens, correct? One of those is incorrect. Which one? Nope, distance is in there. So now you got a 50-50 chance. You can win a specially selected prize, especially selected for you. Focal length. Focal length has nothing to do with depth of field. It's angle of view. The larger an object is, the more in focus it will appear to be. The smaller an object is, the less in focus. No, the smaller an object is, the more in focus it will appear to be. The larger the object is, the less in focus it will appear to be. All lenses have the same depth of field. So why is that important? Because the pretty in a lens, the pretty in a photograph, is always in the blur. All lenses focus, that is their job, but it's how they handle from in focus to blur that is really, really important. That's where the pretty of a photograph is. That's where the area of retreat in this image is, so that you lock on to the eyes and face here. That's all done with the lens. That's not done in post. Because all the problems of a photograph, all the issues, all the things, all the wonders, everything you need in a photograph has to happen at point of capture. Every decision you make has to happen at point of capture. And the more you understand about the middle, the more informed your decisions can be in the beginning, because you know what you're doing, and the more informed your decisions can be at the end, which is the print, but the print is in service of your voice, which happens where? At point of capture. So you travel a circle in a straight line. Now, why does depth of field matter in knowing this? Well, physics is pretty clear about the way lenses work. The only thing that's in focus with a lens is that which the lens is physically focused upon, and anything that crosses the plane of focus. So, in digital, you have a lens that's resolved to about 200 line pair. You have a sensor that resolves to 200 line pair, and you have a printer that has a 3.5 picoliter droplet. Anybody know how big a picoliter is? A trillionth of a liter. Okay, do you know how big 3.5 picoliters is? Let me put that in perspective for you. You know what fog looks like, right? A droplet of fog is 3.5 cubic microns. There are 300 picoliters in a cubic micron. That's how small the drop is. So what you send it, the printer can print, basically is what that comes down to. Film, the lens saw 200 line pair, film saw 150 to 175, and photographic paper saw 75 line pair. So what does that mean? It means that anything above 75 line pair is going to look like what? 75 line pair. So when you stop a lens down, you're going to get an illusion that it's all in focus, right? With digital, if the lens sees 200, the sensor sees 200, and the printer prints whatever you send it, what are you going to see? You're going to see the blur ramp, because lenses can only focus on that which they're focused upon, and anything that crosses the plane of focus, which means blur becomes what? Very important. So what do you pay attention to when you look at a lens? In focus or in blur? Okay, so 1% of the picture, and you just completely ignore the other 99%, and you wonder why you get frustrated about photography. So is your picture more in focus or in blur? It's an interesting thing to think about, isn't it? I invite you to consider when you look at your pictures, how about that? Because all lenses focus, that is their job, but it is how they handle from in focus to blur, how they handle bokeh. Now, for me, I think that the lens company that I'm involved with, Nikon, makes the prettiest bokeh. But that's just me. I invite you to consider that. But what I invite you to consider is that the blur matters. The next picture coming up has an interesting story. So I say to this woman, it's the first time I'm in Cuba, I want a Cuban sandwich. She says, which one? I said, you know, a Cuban sandwich. I'm in Cuba. Make me a Cuban sandwich. She goes, Senor, you are in Cuba. All the sandwiches are Cuban. I knew that. So, getting back to this. Why this matters is if you want 4 things in a photograph, what do you know you need to do? You need 4 photographs if you want 4 elements in photographs. Stopping a lens down doesn't give you more things in focus. What it gives you is more acceptable things out of focus. So the boon of digital is you have total control. The bane of digital is you have total control. And it's understanding the middle and how it works. And it's understanding how you can make an image that moves the viewer by having a situation artistically in which impossible is merely an opinion. And it's an opinion held by the same person that is sitting in your seat. You're the only one that thinks something is impossible in your pictures. You're the only one that says you can't do it. And you're most likely the only one that says, God, my work sucks. There are enough people that'll beat you up. You don't need to help them. And how can you look at everybody else's work and like it, but for some reasons choose not to like your own? You liked the picture when you took it, right? Continue liking it. Now, with all of this stuff, do you see how I play with geometry, and I play with blur, and I play with light? And you know, when you look at a picture, do you find yourself moving to a certain spot in that photograph? Okay, without me, look over here. This is my point. I create optical illusions, and my job is to decide where I want your eye to go, and then to post-process that image in such a way that when I'm done, you see absolutely no chalk marks. Technique, and the reason why it's important to learn technique, is technique makes it so that you don't have to shout. Your voice doesn't have to be shouted to be heard. That you can do the work, you can produce it, and then the viewer looks at your picture and gets moved the same way you were moved. Isn't that a rush when you're out in a moment and the picture just grabs you and you're just like, yeah, my God, look at that lion eat that, I don't know, ambassador. Oh my God. He was taken. Isn't it great that you get to be taken that same way? And the goal of that is to give yourself permission to let the picture take you. Because if you're busy out there trying to find it, you're never, ever, ever going to find it. It's like a hummingbird landing. Oh, let's do Confucius, shall we? Hold on. Got to button up the waiter jacket. According to Confucius, a hummingbird lands on the stillest branch. Your subject, their emotion, their openness to you, that's the hummingbird. You want to take the picture, or the picture take you, you need to become the stillest branch. Now, notice I shoot a lot of children in cars, but a lot of children. How do I get kids to play with me? I don't speak Spanish. I don't speak Burmese, Chinese, Cantonese, Vietnamese, any of the places I go. What I do speak is fluent silly. And I mean up to and including having to be a chicken and doing my chicken impersonation in a grade school. I will do whatever it is that I have to do to be able to get the moment, the reaction, so that I can get the photograph that tells the story. Another thing that I like to play with, which is with cars, is I love reflections. I love the way light reflects into surfaces. I love telling the story of the way people live, so that what I create when you look at the whole body of work is what it is like to be in this bubble and moment of time. Now, there are many wonderful things about going to Cuba, particularly if you're into old cars. I have a 1964 R69S BMW motorcycle, so old vehicles move me. And it's a joy to be able to play with the geometry of this. One of the things that I like to do in my work, and I was asking about why, when you go out to shoot street photography, do you take the camera and practice before you go, is if I know I'm going someplace, I will, for the week before, shoot half an hour of circles, a half an hour of squares, a half an hour of triangles, and then a half an hour trying to combine those elements so that I see things and I can work on them so that when I'm in the hairball of shooting, what occurs is I'm not thinking about it, it is automatic. That I'm automatically seeing these relationships because I've already blown the rust out of the pipes, that I've already got the machine oiled. Because getting to a location is a hassle, and staying there for a long enough time to get these moments is expensive. And it takes a lot of moving of time, effort, and earth to be able to do that. So yes, I tick off my cats and my niece and the bank teller and everybody else in my life, practicing on having an understanding of the way my camera works and understanding of the way my camera feels when I shoot. I find that that is critical. Because what is the best of you, to get back to that point, if not the pictures that you leave behind? Those are going to be the best moments of your life because you spent how much effort, how much time, how much work to get that one moment that says, I was here and this is what it was like and this is important, at least to look at once. If that's true, if the best moments of your life are that way, how much care and effort should you put into creating of those? How much time should you slow down when you finally get to that point where you can move heaven and earth? What I always am amazed at is what people refer to that time as. Oh, it's my spare time, my free time. Really? You're going to tell me that that was free and spare? Isn't it the rarest of and the most expensive time? Look at how much effort you've got to go through to get to that moment where I can turn the cell phone off and I can take pictures. I think that that is the care you should give your pictures, that it's the most precious moments of you. Now, I'm in love with her. And she started singing a song. I don't know what the song was, but this cup became her microphone. And to be able to witness that moment and to be able to photograph it, that was cool. And I get that story and I get that moment to hold, and every time I look at that picture, it becomes an icon of that moment. And somewhere in that image, when you look at that image, is the echo of that experience for me that I get to share with you. Because what's the greatest gift you can give anybody? Is a memory. That's the best gift you can give, and if I can give you a memory of something that I took a picture of. Now, all of these pictures are done with available light. There is no strobe involved, and there is no hot light involved. This is all light that is available to the situation. The majority of the black and whites are infrared, but all of this is available light. And the reason why I choose to do that is that I think that sunlight's probably the prettiest light there is. Reflected, diffused, or direct sunlight, but reflected, diffused sunlight to me is the prettiest light there is to shoot. And one of the beauties of Cuba is they are keen on heavy color. And light picks up the color of the surface that it's reflecting off of. So that what I can get is I can have these warm colors or the cool colors if I need them based on time of day and light the way it hits the building. So that I am using all of the light around me to produce these images. Now, light picks up the color of the surface that it reflects off of. And one of the best ways if you have to do street photography is to always light into a shadow. So what's happening is that this is the light that you see right here off his face, that is light being bounced up from black asphalt, hitting concrete and then into his face. This is the light off of a building across the way, pumping warm light into the picture. So that what happens is I pay attention to, and I invite you to start paying attention to the world around you and the way light reflects off of things. Like, all right, so let's say you have a situation where you need the light over here, there's a window over there, but the light's over there, okay? There's imagine if you will. Light moves an inch every 2 minutes. So if it moves an inch every 2 minutes and the light's over there and I need the lights over here, all I need to do is distract this subject for 10 minutes or come back and the light will be where I want it to be by paying attention to what light does. Now you have my permission at work to stare at the window and watch the light track across your wall. And when your boss comes in, you can say, well, you know, Nikon ambassador Vincent Versace said that I could stare at the light going across the wall. Well, he gave me permission. See if that works for you. No, and Ron can attest to this. When we became ambassadors, we were granted photographic immunity. Yes, we no longer take bad pictures. And by the power invested in Ron and I, for as long as you're here sitting in this room, we grant you photographic immunity. The minute you leave the door, I'm sorry, it's gone. Now, I shoot color and infrared. I want you to look at this because this is in color, full spectrum color, and the next picture coming up, that's in infrared. Do you see a difference? Now, the beauty of photographing infrared is it's the frequency just this side of what you can see. And so you create these images that are just not quite real, but they are real. I like to use geometry in my picture with the juxtaposing, first day with the new mouth, of heads. This one here I love. What secret are they telling? Don't you want to know? It's like they are telling this secret, and I want to know. And I'm driving in Trinidad, and all of these kids are just happy to see big, goofy me. Love Cuba. Only place that likes me. Yeah. And I'm always amazed at what kids will find as toys. And this guy with his balloon, it was how many different ways can you blow up a balloon, sputter the balloon, fly the balloon, do crazy things with the balloon. It was just, to be a kid. And he was all proud of himself too, because he let it go and it went. So, again, let's look at this for a second. You see the blur back there, or you saw the blur back there? You see how that caused your eye to move to that subject? Because that became the area of retreat and the subject became the area of attack. And my job is to tell the story of that kid. So that when you look at that picture, you get that picture. You get that child. Now again, you're going to see a color and an infrared coming up. And I want you to see what happens to the girl when she goes into infrared. Cool, huh? And that's the other cool thing about digital. You couldn't do this with film. Because to be able to do this with film means a dark bag, a refrigerating thing, a chamber, no X-ray, develop it right after you shoot it. I can shoot infrared in 100-degree temperature, no problem. And I can modify the cameras any way I want, so I can even more tell the story. So after this girl comes up, there's a sequence of 3 kids. And what I love to do is play with children. And one of the things I've learned about children is that when one kid starts, if you watch, they will eventually all do it. So the little girl off to the side is watching the little boy be a monster, and she's just da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then when she thinks that I'm not looking, because I went, oh, okay, holding the camera right there, click. So I've got a story where you see the whole thing in 3 pictures. So that's what it's like to be kids living on a street. And that's the story I want to tell with that I just want you to see what it's like to be there in that moment in time. No politics, no statement other than this is what it's like to be a sweet child. These are, I photographed the Cuban Ballet. This is one of the ballet dancers. And Cuba has the best instruction for ballet in the world. The Russians send their ballet dancers to Cuba to learn how to dance, and then they move to Russia because of the influx of Latin dance into the way ballet is taught. And photographing ballet is an absolute trip and a half. You wouldn't know it to look at me. I was a ballerino. My job was to throw ballet dancers basically across the stage. But I have a thing for dancers, and I have a thing for photographing ballet. This is shot with the 105 f1.4, and this is shot through a window this big. So she is basically right in there because the light was bouncing in this little light well up the wall and gave me diffused light. This is 4,000 ISO on the D5. Does that not blow you away that we have cameras today that all you have to do is imagine the word light and you can take a picture? I actually have lit a portrait with a cell phone. This is infrared, and the next one is infrared. And what I wanted to do here was to create the most classic pose in black and white. It just struck me as pretty, the gesture of it. And what caught me was she was warming up to do a shot for me, and when she did that, it was like, can you do that again? And just click, got it. Took me a couple of times, but that was the goal. Frequently, I don't know if I want to do them color or black and white, so sometimes I wind up doing them both. The reason why I like to do black and white, and where I think the decision to do black and white happens, is because I always get asked, you know, when do you know to make it a black and white? Because making it a black and white is, well, it didn't work in color. Let's take all the color out, call it art. When the color gets in the way of the gesture, when the image is so strong that the color is like, oh my God, this color is just in the way of what the subject is doing. One of the ways I look at photography is I view light as a solid object. And we can argue whether it is or isn't, but conceptually I try to treat it the same way I treat the solidness of the subject itself. And I look at the subject interrupting my light. Instead of me lighting them, what they're doing is interrupting whatever pretty light I find myself in or create. And in so doing with that, what happens is you get these wonderful pictures because the light in a photograph is the jewel of the photograph. What would you rather look at? The Taj Mahal poorly lit or a clothesline of laundry beautifully lit? The beautifully lit laundry, right? So what does that tell you about the importance of light? That light can take something as simple as a line of clothing and make it exquisitely beautiful. These shots were of the scariest shots I have ever done in my life because I am in their face with the camera and they're doing this. And I thought the word Nikon was going to be knocked into my head backwards. And when this guy came running at me, it was like, I'm going to die now. It's all over. Ron, you can have my cameras. And it's interesting, ballet dancers and boxers, they're very similar in the way they move, except one's a little bit more aggressive about it than the other. But the beauty of what they do, the focus, the intensity, is just something I want to make sure that I get because that's a big part of Cuban culture. I love the sequence in black and white, and you're going to see it in color. And the reason why I landscape those together is, to me, that sequence of shots is as if this guy's remembering what it was like to be the young kids. And so, but do you see how the color, as cool as it is, gets in the way of that image? It's pretty, but I think it's a far more successful black and white. And the reason being is that the colors are too much. Again, so I photographed, the first sequence you saw, RGB, right? Red, green, blue. Then I noticed that, so I went out and shot cyan, magenta, yellow, and I haven't found a black. So I figure, all right, well, we'll just, get yellow, cyan, magenta, RGB, the primaries, the secondaries of car parts. But the amount of old cars and finding the geometry in that, because one of the things that I like to do is I like to give myself a self-assignment of how do I find geometry and isolation in parts that weren't designed to be that way. And why do I do that? So that when I am in the hairball, when I have to think like this, those pathways are already developed. In a non-mission critical situation, I've practiced to the point where I can do that in a mission critical situation. Practice really doesn't make perfect, you know. It's perfect practice that makes perfect. You have to practice at practicing. And what best place to practice but in your everyday life? Look at how much money you spend on camera gear, right? You own a small camera store. So it sits in your closet. Okay, let's look at it from a business return on investment, shall we? So you spent $3,000 for the camera body, call it $2,000 for the lens, and $300 for the card. Okay, so let's just call it $5,000. We'll round down, like Han Solo did on the Kessel Run. So if you only take one picture, how much did that one picture cost you? $5,000. But if you take 75,000 pictures, they're just pennies. And so you have made and saved money by taking more pictures, and therefore you can buy even more camera equipment. Try that on your spouse. That's never worked for me, but give it a go. Now, I love when somebody gives you a gift, you take it, right? Like the woman that we just saw, she gave me that photograph. She was out of her mind on rum, smoking cigars, that's okay. Sees me and basically says in Spanish, "Want to take my picture, kid?" Sure. Or this woman here, where she sees me, asks me to, I take her picture and then asks me to send a copy to her kids in the United States. What the camera has afforded me is the ability to have a conversation with people, and it gets me into doors and places I would never be. The way in which I can do that is, we get back to, you should always carry the camera, and you should get to know that camera as well as you know yourself, because I don't make it anything other than click and down. And I can walk in because I can take a picture, and the power of a digital camera is I can show them on the back the cool shot that I've got, and if it's cool enough, I have walked into places I'm not supposed to be. And I've had people that I would never meet come and get me, literally, come and get me. I was in India, and 3 Land Cruisers pull up, and armed Indian army people with big machine gunny things step out, and this guy about this tall, who is as tall as he is round, walks up to me and says, "Mr. Versace, Mr. Thackeray would like the pleasure of your presence now, sir." Now you got 12 people with submachine guns, and you got a guy that as big as he is round saying somebody wants the pleasure of your presence. I'm Italian. That has a different meaning for me. So I get in the car, we drive to the mayor's bungalow, and it turns out that Udahoff Thackeray is a Nikon shooter and is into infrared and has heard that I'm in town, and he would like me to teach him infrared. Or the most powerful man in India has informed me I am now his instructor. I ate well while being held hostage. The best moment, though, is he did something, and I just went, "You can't do that, that's just dumb." And you just watch the collective room go, and it was silent, and one guy goes, "You do realize that is Mr. Thackeray?" And I go, "I appreciate that is, but he's my student, and that was dumb." And he goes, "Well, how do I do it better?" And I'm like, so it gets you into places you would never get. You get to meet people you would never meet, and you get to see things you would never see. And the reason why you get to see things you would never see is because you're forced with the camera to see the world like that. We take the world in like this, but the minute that camera gets up to our face, we enter into a whole other different level of consciousness. Relativity kicks in. Anybody familiar with relativity? Theory of relativity? You want the best definition of relativity? My aunt gave it to me. Put your hand on a stove for a minute, talk, it feels like an hour. Talk to a pretty girl for an hour, it feels like a minute. That's relativity. That's how Einstein described it. It's like, all right, so when you pick up that camera, time slows down, the world becomes this small place, and you can connect to it in a way in which you can be receptive to be open, to be taken. The key to that is to make it so that when you do that, you're not busy running a dialogue in your head that you don't know what you're doing, you're not very good, blah, blah, blah. Leave that all at home. How do you get to a point where you don't run that dialogue? Carry the camera with you. Play with it. How do you know what lenses to pick? Rent them. Play with them. Because they're brushes. The sensor is the canvas, but the lens is the brush. And the lens does amazing things. And you need to pay attention to what does the best job for your vision. What gives you the best blur? What gives you the best focus? What gives you the best depth of field? Do you want everything in focus? Do you want blur? Answer those questions. Those are the important questions to really, really know. Because when you get into a situation like this where you have to tell a compelling story, you need all of the tools in your arsenal accessible like that, and you need to be able to pull them up like that so that what you can do is create an image that is of the moment that took you, that shows you what you saw in a picture so that you can show others. And if you can achieve that, and really it just comes from play with the camera. You spent the money, have fun with the damn thing. That, I think, is what matters.
Go to the store and eat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. How'd it go?